The shape in the snow wasn't moving. Joel pulled his horse to a halt, breath clouding in the frigid air. February dusk settled over the Wyoming territory like a shroud, and the temperature had already dropped below zero. Wind howled through the bare cottonwoods along Willow Creek, and heavy snow obscured everything beyond 20 yards. He squinted at the dark bundle near the frozen creek, too small to be a calf, too still to be alive. Joel dismounted, boots crunching through the snow crust. As he approached, he made out the shape of a person, bundled in tattered cloth, collapsed on their side. The figure was small, feminine, breath coming in shallow rasps. "You'll freeze out here, ma'am," Joel said, kneeling beside her. "Let me help." A weak hand pushed against his chest. The effort cost her. She slumped back, unconscious. Joel slid his arms beneath her, lifting carefully. As he stood, the cloth wrapping her head came loose, falling away. Lamplight from his distant cabin caught her face. Recognition hit him like a fist to the chest. Sarah, Thomas's widow, 5 years. 5 years since he'd last seen her at the funeral, pale and silent while the town whispered. 5 years since she'd vanished, leaving only rumors and scandal behind. Now she was here, dying on land that had once belonged to his brother. Joel's mind reeled, but his body moved on instinct. He carried her toward the cabin, her weight almost nothing in his arms. Snow fell harder, covering their tracks. "Don't," she whispered against his coat, barely audible. "Don't tell." He kicked the cabin door open and stepped into warmth. Sarah's hands lay near the fire, fingers curled like claws, skin mottled white and red from frostbite. Joel had removed her boots, the leather cracked, soles worn completely through. He'd wrapped her in every blanket he owned and built the fire high enough to make the cabin swelter. Now he waited, sitting across from her, watching for signs of life. Her eyes opened slowly. For a moment, she stared at the ceiling, disoriented. Then she turned her head and saw him. Shame flooded her face. She tried to sit up, too weak to manage it. "Easy," Joel said. "You're safe." "Safe." The word came out bitter. Sarah managed to prop herself on one elbow. "Where am I?" "My cabin." "You were collapsed on my land." Understanding dawned. Her face went paler. "I didn't know. I'll leave at first light." "You'll leave when you can walk without collapsing." Joel leaned forward. "What happened?" "Sarah, where have you been?" She looked away, firelight casting shadows across her face. For a long moment, she said nothing. Then the words came, halting and quiet. "After Thomas died, the debt collectors came, said he owed for supplies, for credit at the store." She pulled the blanket tighter. "The town started talking, said I'd been extravagant, improper, that I'd driven him to take dangerous work. That's not. The church ladies said I mourned wrong. Didn't weep loud enough at the funeral, I suppose." Her voice hardened. "They called me cold, Eastern, said my pride killed him." Joel remembered the whispers. He'd heard them, believed them. The shame of it burned now. "I left rather than fight them," Sarah continued. "Seemed easier to disappear than watch them bury me beside him with their gossip. Where have you been?" "Wandering. Odd jobs when I could find them. Charity when I couldn't." She met his eyes. "Winter caught me 2 weeks ago. I thought I could make it south, but the storms came early. This land, it was the only place I remembered feeling safe, even briefly." The fire cracked, sending sparks up the chimney. "Stay until spring," Joel heard himself say. "Until the thaw. Then you can decide where to go." Sarah studied his face, searching for pity or judgment. She found neither. "Just until spring," she agreed softly, as she drifted into exhausted sleep. Joel stared at Thomas's old coat hanging on the wall. Guilt gnawed at him. He'd believed the town's lies. He'd let them destroy her reputation while doing nothing. Now she was back, and soon enough, someone would notice. Joel woke to the sound of metal scraping wood. Pale winter sun filtered through the cabin windows. The fire had burned low. Sarah was crouched by the door, tools in hand, working on the broken latch Thomas had never fixed. Joel sat up slowly, watching her. She moved with quiet efficiency, tightening screws, testing the mechanism. Her hands were still bandaged, but she worked around the wrappings. Latch was rusted through, she said without looking up. Would have broken in the next storm. Thomas meant to fix that. Thomas meant to fix many things. The words carried no bitterness, just simple fact. Joel pulled on his boots, trying to reconcile this capable woman with the fragile ornament he'd imagined years ago. He remembered Thomas 3 years younger, impulsive and romantic. Thomas had met Sarah when she came west to teach school. He'd courted her for 3 months before proposing. Joel had disapproved. She was educated, refined, from Boston. She didn't belong on a hardscrabble Wyoming ranch. The brothers had argued. Joel called Thomas reckless. Thomas called Joel a coward, afraid of anything that required faith instead of calculation. They'd barely spoken after the wedding, when Thomas died. Joel had kept his distance from Sarah. It seemed easier to believe the town's version that she'd been demanding, extravagant, that she'd pushed Thomas into the dangerous ride that killed him. Now, watching her work, Joel saw his own prejudice clearly. Sarah finished with the latch and moved to the woodpile. She split kindling with practiced strokes, stacked it neatly. She took a torn flour sack and began stitching it into dish towels, her needle moving in perfect, even lines. Not helpless, not ornamental, just surviving. Late afternoon brought a visitor, Clem Walker, Joel's nearest neighbor, riding past on the road. He paused when he saw the smoke pattern from the chimney, different than usual. 2 people's worth of cooking and heating. Clem's eyes narrowed. He touched his hat brim but didn't approach. Then he turned his horse toward town. Joel watched him go, stomach sinking. That evening, Clem stopped at the Silver Dollar Saloon. He mentioned to the barkeep, casual-like, that Joel seemed to have company. 2 shadows in the cabin window at dusk. The barkeep told his wife. She told the pastor's wife, Martha Daniels. By morning, half the town knew someone was staying at Joel Carson's place. The clock had started ticking. Mid-March brought the first real thaw. Snow melted in patches, revealing brown grass underneath. The creek ice cracked audibly, water flowing beneath the surface. Mornings were still cold, but afternoons held a hint of warmth. Joel and Sarah had fallen into a rhythm. He rode fence lines and checked on his small herd. She managed the cabin cooking meals that reminded him of childhood, mending his clothes, keeping the fire steady. They didn't talk much at first, but slowly, carefully, they began to share pieces of the past. What did Thomas want for this place? Sarah asked one morning, watching Joel repair a bridle. Joel paused, considering. He talked about building it into something bigger. More cattle, better pasture management. He wanted to help the neighbors, too. Said a community only survives if everyone prospers. You didn't agree. I thought he was chasing dreams instead of profits. Joel set the bridle aside. I just wanted to survive, keep my head down, make enough to get by. Thomas wanted legacy. Sarah produced a small leather journal from her pack. He wrote about you. Joel took it carefully. The pages were filled with Thomas's cramped handwriting plans, calculations, observations. Near the end, dated 6 months before his death, Joel thinks I'm reckless. Maybe I am. But I'd rather fail chasing good than succeed hiding from it. Someday we'll reconcile. He'll see what I see, that this land can be more than just survival. Joel's throat tightened. He was braver than me. Different kinds of brave, Sarah said gently. That afternoon, Joel taught Sarah to ride his gentler mare. She was nervous at first, gripping the saddle horn too tight, but after a few circuits of the pasture, she relaxed, even laughed when the horse broke into a trot. The sound caught Joel off guard. He'd never heard her laugh before. They walked to the creek together afterward. The ice was breaking up, water rushing underneath, pushing against the frozen surface. Things frozen longest take time to thaw, Sarah observed. Watching the water flow, Joel glanced at her, wondering if she meant the creek or something else. On the road above the property, Martha Daniels sat in her buggy, watching them. She saw Sarah on horseback, Joel steadying her with one hand. She saw them standing by the creek, talking like old friends. Martha's face hardened. She turned the buggy around and drove straight to the church. Pastor Daniels listened to his wife's report, fingers steepled. Then he sent for Banker Harlan and Sheriff Wade. "We have a situation," he said. "That requires immediate attention." Late March evening brought rain instead of snow. The temperature had climbed above freezing, and water dripped steadily from the cabin eaves. Inside, lamplight made the small space feel even smaller, more intimate. Sarah sat near the fire, Thomas's final journal entry open in her trembling hands. The page was dated the day he died. "He wrote this the morning he left," she said quietly. Before he wrote out, Joel waited, sensing she needed to speak. "Thomas died racing to fetch the doctor for the Henderson boy. Scarlet fever. The family couldn't afford treatment." Sarah's voice steadied. "Thomas made it. The doctor came. The boy lived. But Thomas's horse stumbled on the way back. Threw him in the dark. He hit his head on rocks by the creek." She looked up at Joel. "The town didn't want to remember that part. Easier to make me the villain." Joel felt sick. The debt wasn't extravagance. Thomas had been paying medical bills for 3 families. The Hendersons, the Parsons, the McCreadys. He gave them credit at the general store he partly owned. Sarah set the journal down carefully. "Banker Harlan seized everything after Thomas died, spread rumors to justify it. Said Thomas had been reckless with money, that I'd demanded too much. The pastor supported Harlan. The church received a generous donation from the estate sale." Her expression was distant. "I was too grief-stricken to fight, too proud to defend myself publicly. I thought silence was dignity." Joel moved to sit beside her. "I believed them. God forgive me. Sarah, I believed you'd... I know. Everyone did. That's why I left." They sat in silence, fire crackling between them. Joel's mind churned with conflicting emotions. He was falling in love with his brother's widow. Was that betrayal, or was it redemption for failing them both? Sarah seemed to sense his struggle. She touched his hand lightly. Thomas would want someone to love this land, to finish what he started. Joel pulled back, unable to reconcile the storm inside him. That night, neither slept well. Morning brought discovery. Sarah found at first an anonymous note shoved under the door. Cheap paper folded once send her away or face God's judgment. Her face went pale. Joel took the note, read it, then crumpled it and threw it into the fire. "Cowards," he muttered. But fear had entered the cabin like cold air through cracks. Sarah began calculating how quickly she could leave. Joel began calculating what defiance would cost. Neither spoke their fears aloud. Sunday afternoon arrived with unexpected warmth. Spring was winning its battle against winter. Wildflowers pushed through mud, and birdsong filled the air. Sarah was hanging laundry when she saw them 3 riders approaching from town. She recognized the lead horse immediately. "Joel!" she called, voice tight. He emerged from the barn, saw the riders, and his jaw set. "Go inside." Sarah obeyed but stayed at the window, watching. Pastor Daniels dismounted first, followed by Banker Harlan and Sheriff Wade. They arranged themselves in a semicircle facing Joel, a tribunal come to judgment. "Morning, Joel," Pastor Daniels began, voice carrying false warmth. "We've come on behalf of the congregation. There are concerns about the situation here. What situation? Don't play ignorant. You're sheltering that woman. Harlan gestured toward the cabin. It's improper. Scandalous. Joel's hands clenched. Her name is Sarah, my brother's widow. And she nearly froze to death on my land. Was I supposed to let her die? You were supposed to send her on her way once she recovered, Pastor Daniels said. Instead, you've kept her here for weeks. The town is talking. Joel, your immortal soul is at risk. My immortal soul is my concern. Harlan stepped forward. There's also the matter of Thomas's estate. Debts remain. Her presence here suggests a claim on your property. Joel reached into his coat and pulled out Thomas's journals. My brother kept records. Every penny he spent helping families in need. The Hendersons. The Parsons. The McCreadys. The debt you claimed was charity, not extravagance. He thrust the journals toward them. Thomas died saving a child. You buried that truth to steal from his widow. Pastor Daniels barely glanced at the journals. Convenient stories from the dead can't be verified. Joel, we have only your word and hers. Then you're calling me a liar. We're trying to save you. Sheriff Wade spoke for the first time, his voice weary. Wade had been Thomas's childhood friend. You know how this looks. Send her away. It's best for everyone. Joel opened his mouth to refuse, to tell them all to leave his land, but he hesitated. The cost of defiance crystallized in his mind, suppliers refusing service. Social exile, economic ruin. He'd lose everything Thomas had built. The silence stretched too long. Inside the cabin, Sarah saw the hesitation. She saw fear win, without a word. She turned from the window and began gathering her few belongings into her pack. You have until Saturday, Pastor Daniel said. Decide what matters more, your standing in this community or your brother's mistake. The delegation mounted their horses and rode away, satisfied. Joel turned toward the cabin. Through the window, he saw Sarah folding her spare dress, her movements mechanical. He wanted to go inside, to tell her he'd been wrong to hesitate. But the words died in his throat, choked by cowardice disguised as pragmatism. That evening, they ate in silence. Afterward, Sarah spoke quietly. You don't have to say it. I understand. Joel said nothing. Shame tasted like ash. Joel rode alone through the night, headed for the cemetery on the hill overlooking town. The moon was nearly full, casting silver light across the landscape. Below, the creek rushed with snowmelt, louder than he'd heard it in years. Thomas's grave sat at the hill's crest, marked by a simple wooden cross. Joel dismounted and knelt, hat in his hands. For a long time, he said nothing. Then, as if his brother could hear, he began to speak. I was jealous of you. Always was. The words came rough, torn from deep inside. You had courage I never did. Faith. You believed in people, in possibility. I just believed in protecting myself. Wind stirred the grass around the grave. When you died, I didn't defend Sarah. I let them destroy her. It was easier to believe their lies than admit I'd been wrong about everything. Joel's voice cracked. I've been a coward, Thomas. Afraid of losing the land, losing respect, losing the comfort of being left alone. He remembered the journal entry. Courage isn't the absence of fear. It's love strong enough to fear nothing. You died saving a life, and I can't even risk my reputation to save the woman you loved. The words hung in the air. Joel realized he'd spoken the truth. Sarah was still the woman Thomas loved, but she was also becoming the woman Joel loved. Not betrayal, continuation. I can't bring you back, Joel said, but I can finish what you started. I can be the brother you believed I could be. The decision crystallized in his chest. Solid as stone, he stood, placed his hat back on, and mounted his horse. The ride back took half the time, driven by urgent purpose. Dawn was breaking when he reached the cabin. The door stood open. Sarah was gone. On the table, a note in her careful handwriting. Thank you for the warmth. Forget me. As Joel found her tracks heading east toward the main road, he saddled a fresh horse, grabbed supplies, and rode hard into the rising sun. He found her 2 hours later, walking along the rutted track, her pack on her shoulders. She didn't turn when she heard hoofbeats approaching. Joel dismounted and blocked her path. No, he said simply. Joel, don't. I was wrong. You're not leaving. Sarah's eyes filled with tears. You can't ask me to stay. You'll lose everything. Then I'll lose it standing for something that matters. He took her pack gently. I'm not asking you to stay hidden. I'm asking you to come back and stand with me. In front of the whole town. Let them see the truth. They won't listen. Then we'll make them listen. Sarah searched his face and saw something she'd never seen before, certainty without fear. All right, she whispered. They rode back together. Not to the cabin, but toward town. It was Sunday morning. The church bells would ring soon. The congregation was gathering when Joel and Sarah rode into the town square. Families dressed in their Sunday best paused mid-conversation. Children pointed. Women clutched their husbands' arms. Joel dismounted and helped Sarah down. She was terrified he could feel her trembling, but she stood straight beside him. The church bell tolled. Pastor Daniels emerged from the building, his face darkening when he saw them. This is holy ground, Joel. Remove her immediately. I'm here to set the record straight. Joel's voice carried across the square. My brother Thomas was a saint compared to most men here. How dare you? Joel pulled out Thomas's journals and held them high. Thomas Carson spent his own money paying medical bills for families who couldn't afford treatment. He gave credit to widows and orphans. He died racing through a storm to save the Henderson boy from scarlet fever. He looked around at the gathered crowd. How many of you know that? How many of you buried that truth so you could steal from his widow? Murmurs rippled through the congregation. Some looked away, ashamed. Thomas's debt wasn't recklessness. Joel continued. It was charity. But it was easier to blame Sarah than admit you'd taken advantage of a good man's death. Banker Harlan pushed forward. This is unseemly. Joel, you have no proof. He has proof. The voice came from the back of the crowd. Rancher Henderson stepped forward, hat in his weathered hands. It's true. My boy lived because Thomas rode through that storm. I never got to thank him proper. Widow Parsons spoke next, her voice shaking. Thomas paid my store credit for 2 winters. Never asked for repayment, never told a soul. One by one, families stepped forward. The McCreadys, the Johnsons, the Lees, each one testified to Thomas's quiet generosity. The tide turned. Sheriff Wade removed his hat slowly, looking at Sarah. Ma'am, I apologize. Thomas was a better man than I've been. I should have defended you years ago. Joel turned to face Pastor Daniels and Banker Harlan. Judge her, then judge me. Judge Thomas. Judge yourselves for profiting from his death. Pastor Daniels stood frozen, his moral authority crumbling. Harlan looked around for support and found none. Sarah's hand found Joel's. He squeezed gently. The congregation parted, creating a path. Joel and Sarah walked through the silence, heads high, vindicated by truth. Behind them, Sheriff Wade approached the pastor. I think it's time we reviewed the estate settlement. See where that donation actually came from. Harlan went pale. Joel and Sarah mounted the horse together. As they rode away from town, Sarah whispered, Thank you. For what? For being brave enough to love me. Joel didn't correct her. She was right. Late May sunshine warmed the earth, and wildflowers bloomed across Joel's pasture in waves of purple and gold. The cabin had been expanded, a new room added to the east side, the roof freshly shingled. Sarah's garden plot thrived, rows of vegetables pushing through rich soil. On the hill, Thomas's grave was marked now with a proper stone, a wreath of fresh wildflowers laid at its base. Joel worked on the fence line, resetting a post that had rotted through winter. Sarah knelt in the garden nearby, thinning carrot seedlings, humming softly to herself. The town had transformed. Families brought food in the weeks after Joel's stand, offering silent apologies through fresh bread and preserves. Young couples asked for advice. Children played in the yard while their parents helped with spring planting. Pastor Daniels had resigned quietly. Banker Harlan had been forced to make restitution to Thomas's estate. A new preacher arrived, young and earnest, determined to rebuild the church's moral standing. Joel and Sarah weren't married yet. She'd asked for time, and he understood. Some wounds needed healing before new vows could be spoken. But they were building something real, a partnership forged in fire and vindicated by truth. Every Sunday, they visited Thomas's grave together. Sarah brought flowers. Joel brought news of the land, speaking to his brother as if he could hear, "The cattle are healthy. The creek's running clear. We're thinking about expanding the herd next spring." Joel paused. "She's teaching me to read your journals properly. Turns out you had some good ideas." Sarah smiled, touching the gravestone gently. "He'd forgive you, you know. He'd be glad you stayed." They walked back toward the cabin, hand in hand. The door latch gleamed, newly oiled and functional. Inside, Thomas's journals sat on an honored shelf beside a vase of wildflowers. Through the window, curtains Sarah had sewn shifted in the breeze. In the eaves above the door, a bird had built a nest. Joel had noticed it last week, spotted eggs cradled in woven grass. New life sheltered by what they'd built together. Sarah paused at the threshold, looking back at the land green and alive and full of promise. "Home," she said softly. Joel nodded. "Home." She stepped inside. He followed, closing the door gently behind them. Through the window, lamplight glowed warm and steady. Two shadows moved in comfortable rhythm, cooking, talking, living. Outside, spring continued its ancient work. The creek flowed freely. Wildflowers bloomed in the places where snow had buried everything. And on the hill, Thomas's grave stood watch over the land he'd loved, the woman he'd married, and the brother who'd finally learned what courage meant. The wind carried the scent of growing things, of second chances, of homes built the hard way, log by log, choice by choice, love by love. The end, Western Tales frontier, where every good thing worth having comes the hard way.